I want students to know you don't have to go to an Ivy League school.
Even if you commit to a college, that isn't even the end of the decision.
Great. I love it. Now you know what you don't want to do. And that's just as important. There are so many different ways to get there. There are limitless opportunities.
Adulthood is filled with do-over after do-over.
Don't look at the goal as the end, look at the goal as the next step.
Welcome back to the OpenEd podcast. I'm your sometimes host, Andrea Fife. With high school graduations right around the corner in neighborhoods nationwide, today's guests are ready to tackle a timely topic, setting post-high school goals and achieving them. So let me introduce you to Rose Ybaben, independent education advisor and founder of Soaring to College. After earning her master's degree in counseling at St. Mary's University in San Antonio, she went on to work with students of all ages over 15 years. Most recently, as a high school counselor, she focuses on supporting students and families navigating the post-high school college transition process. Rose enjoys helping to make this process clear, manageable, and even fun for families. Rose, can you tell me a little bit more about the areas that you specialize in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I specialize in advising plans for high school students and their families. We look at courses they can take during high school. We look at extracurriculars. We also look at a timeline during high school. There are certain things that freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors should be looking at during those years. So we look at that together and make a plan. We explore different educational, career, and even volunteer opportunities so that we make the high school experience as personal as we can for every student. And then finally, we look at, are they looking at college? Are they looking at employment, military, whatever. My thing is, find every option available to every student out there.
That's amazing. I was introduced to Rose by a colleague of mine, Danielle Randall, who has also joined us here today. When it comes to open education, Danielle has experienced it all. She is a homeschooling parent who has been teaching secondary mathematics at middle school and high school levels for almost 12 years. She has teaching experience in public, charter, and private school settings. And now Danielle draws from her diverse experiences as she supports students at OpenEd who have chosen to pursue a state-certified diploma. So Danielle, I know that you have conducted more advisory sessions with students than I can possibly count. These students are typically looking to get something different out of their high school experience. Can you share an example or two of a student who's doing something particularly innovative?
Yeah, so all the students that I talk to, one of their first goals is to get that state certified diploma, but then a lot of them have really neat things going on the side in addition to that. Lots of really great certifications going on in EMTs and the medical field. Either that's where they're sticking and that's where they want to be, or that's a precursor to something bigger that they want to do. I've also seen some really neat certifications that I didn't even know were a thing. Like, I think that's something that's really cool when you start talking to kids about their goals and their plans, is that they have ideas that you've never heard of. So things like being a wildlands firefighter, for instance, and having that as a goal as post-high school is really, really cool. And they can do that and do all the field work and the experience that they need to while getting the state certified diploma through OpenEd.
That is amazing. This is all a very timely conversation for me today as a mom. My own high school senior just left, even though graduation is still 2 weeks away. His path, he opened so many doors for himself, non-traditional doors, that I had to write a letter to the administration and say he is going to be absent for the last 9 days of high school because you've prepared him so well that he is already on to the next chapter. So I just put my 18-year-old on a plane today. He's headed across the country to accept a paid position in a field that he has worked hard to open those doors. And when he gets back after the summer, he's lined up a paid surveyor position at an engineering firm while he takes a gap year before accepting the acceptance that he has to a local university to study engineering. So watching one of these high schoolers that I'm so inspired by, my own son, forge his own path. I'm just so excited to talk to you both today about this area that I'm so passionate about, which is helping high school students imagine the possibilities that might exist for them and breaking down any barriers that might stand in their way. So let's just get into it. This exciting topic today. Tell me a little bit about, do you typically start to work with a student or family? Rose, is there an ideal timeline to start talking about a student's goals?
I think that line of communication needs to be open sooner than later with all families. That dialogue needs to start, by ninth grade at the latest, in the sense that what is it that I want my high school years to look like? What do I want to accomplish? Do I want to be a traditional student? Do I want to do dual enrollment? Do I want to graduate with an associate's degree? Like, there are limitless opportunities for students. And when we get that dialogue started, then the parents with that goal. So I have it broken up into 4 years, and I really look at what we can do each year during high school. But I think including the parents and the students, the sooner the better.
That's great. Danielle, what have you seen in your work? Have you found that there's an ideal time? And then kind of the opposite side of that, is it ever too late to start having these conversations?
I do a lot of planning just the classes, as we kind of make sure that we're hitting those state certified goals. But I don't think there's a time that's too late to make those goals and to reach them. Sometimes you might set a goal and it might be a little harder to get there just because we're a little late on deciding, but there's so many different pathways to reach those goals. When we're making a 4-year plan to get something that's as rigid or as, delineated as a state certified diploma, meeting earlier rather than later is always easier. Because then we can make sure that we're spreading out workloads, that we're getting all of the different experiences we want, and there's no sense of cramming things in at the end. So I'm with Rose that the earlier that we're having these conversations, the better things go.
I love that. How often do you meet with a student that feels like they don't have it figured out yet? And what do you recommend for someone who's at that time of life where people are starting to ask them, what are you going to do next? What comes next? How do you help a student navigate that uncertainty, especially when you're saying, let's get this started by ninth grade, recognizing we're talking about like a 14 or 15-year-old. How do you navigate that uncertainty?
Sure. So for me, I love just getting to know the student from the very beginning. What do you like doing? If you had a spare hour or two, what are you doing with that spare hour? Because if that's what you like doing, then let's head that direction. And there's so many different options in any direction that you pick that if we can just kind of narrow it to some interests, then we can go from there. And a lot of kids come in with some really specific ideas about what they want. But when you can introduce them to, look at all these other things that are also on this same pathway, maybe you can explore some of these other really neat things when, I just want to be a doctor. What does that mean? And what other opportunities are there? What can you do to explore on your pathway there? So really focusing on what do they like doing and where do they want to see themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that 100%. I think we're both on the same page when we say we really have to understand where the student is coming from and meet them at that point, right? Meet them exactly where they are, and also help them realize that what they decide now is not permanent forever. Right? That we can be flexible. So, I'm getting to know them, and in the process, the student's getting to know him or herself as well, as we explore a variety of, self-interests and hobbies. And I think too, there's wonderful self-assessments out there that look at where are my strengths, where are my challenges, and how does that relate to what do I want to do in high school and after high school. So to really examine all of that and just be gentle with, these 14 and 15-year-olds and sometimes first-time parents going through this with their child, right? There is no one path. So flexibility is key here.
Yeah, I think when you're, watching kids as they pick classes through high school and then especially as they start thinking about college, there's so many chances to take things that you maybe wouldn't have expected to take because, by golly, you might love that medical terminology class when, going into the medical field was not even on your radar, but this is really, really cool. And then, it's not just commit to med school for all of those years and everything, but, there's radiology, there's certifications, there's nursing, and there's all of those options. And maybe that came because you just decided to branch out and take a medical terminology class to fulfill your CTE credit for the state diploma.
Right. And I'll just add one other little thing on top of that. There's also a whole variety of ways to get to that medical field position, right? It can be employment. It can be part-time employment, volunteering. It can be, we have these technical schools in our area. It can be college. So there are so many different ways. Again, there's not one path to get there.
That's so great. And I love hearing that. Walk me through some of the questions you might ask a student as you're getting to know them. And especially you mentioned that oftentimes they're still getting to know themselves. These questions you ask them, they may not even have asked themselves yet. Where would you start with getting to know a student?
For me, I typically will say, just tell me a little bit about yourself. What do you do for fun? What do you enjoy? What do you not enjoy? What do you see yourself doing in high school that you've never done in middle school or in elementary school, right? So just these questions, open-ended questions to begin that exploration, self-discovery. That's where I always start.
I love asking about specific classes too. What is your favorite class right now? It's a great way to check in mid-semester when they're, eyeball deep in their work. What is your favorite class? What are you looking forward to? Or what have you already finished because it was so awesome you just cranked it out really fast? And then what's a struggle? And what are you not looking forward to? What are you leaving off till the end? Because that gives you a ton of information about what they like doing, and then also how they deal with frustration or changing plans and adapting to different scenarios.
Yeah. Another really good question is, what surprised you the most this semester? Because that looks at, wow, I was really good in A, B, and C, or I really struggle with D, E, and F, right? So that is some type of work that they get to do with that type of question too.
So we've been kind of talking a lot about, we've been using a lot of traditional education terminology here in this conversation. And I think that makes sense because we're talking about some goals that can be seen as traditional. Getting into college, some of these occupations come with a fairly traditional path. We're talking about students who may want to earn a state certified diploma, which is definitely a traditional route. What about for students whose background in education may be less traditional, that may be less familiar with talking in terms of semesters or in terms of courses? Where would you recommend starting this conversation for someone whose background in education has been less straightforward?
I still start with, what do you like? I think it just always comes back to what have you enjoyed doing the most? Has it been the field trips and the hands-on stuff that you've been able to do? Has it been the experiences that you've loved? I think there was an article that I read a while ago about engineering school and how so many kids loved engineering when they were in high school because they got to do lots of hands-on projects. Then they got into college doing engineering, and it was a lot more of the book work, and that's a totally different experience. And so I think it's important to have a conversation about, did you enjoy reading the book and really learning? Did you enjoy that synthesizing of information, or did you enjoy getting out and doing stuff? Was that what you loved? Was that the best way that you learned? What was the thing that you were excited to do the next day? Even if it's non-traditional, the types of experiences that you enjoyed having are the ones that you should continue looking for.
Yeah, once again, I agree with Danielle. I think bottom line, no matter how you get to that end goal, I think it's crucial that the student understands who they are. And I know they're young, but starts to understand the process of self-discovery and what they want, what they enjoy. And then we look at, okay, how do we get you there, right? And know that it's not one straight line. We can move forward 2 steps, move back 3, and then go up 4. So just really understanding what is it that you want to explore, and then we'll find a way to get you there.
Rose, you mentioned some tools that can be helpful for students on that path of self-discovery. Is there anything offhand that you would recommend that parents and students look into if that's kind of where they're starting on their journey, is let's figure out who I am?
Yeah, there are some self-assessments out there that students can take. There are certain programs out there. Some are free online, and I can get some of those resources out to you. And some are paid. I know some schools offer what's called Naviance is one of those programs, and they have self-assessments out there, and they look at the self-discovery related to career goals and pathways and what's related to that main pathway of, let's say, accounting or business, right? Oh, I've strengthened the business area. Okay, is it accounting? Is it finance? Is it marketing? Is it supply chain management? And so it looks at a variety of different ways to support that business goal. Does that make sense? And then from there, they look at, okay, what educational pathways do we need? What work experience do we need? So it's a really good stepping stone to give these students some insight into, okay, what do I have to do to get there?
That's great. You had mentioned that some of the things that you work with students on is figuring out what the right type of experience is for them in working toward those goals, different places that they can be headed after high school. What do you get the most excited about talking to students about that maybe they wouldn't have naturally thought of on their own as an option after high school?
I think I get most excited about the variety of options. I think that so many of our students, because of society and because of these norms that, are placed on our adolescents, that it is high school, college, work. And it's not the case. I mean, again, there's military options. There are technical schools. There's so many internships, right? Where you can do some hands-on work, shadowing with people. Like, let's get this while they're in high school, while they're young, while they're excited, and while they can say, you know what, that was fantastic. I loved it. I want to explore more. Great example, my son, first job ever, he was in a mailroom of this huge company. He was excited because it was a rock climbing company, right? So it was rock climbing and outdoors, and he was in that mailroom and was miserable. And so I said to him, great, I love it. Now you know what you don't want to do. And that's just as important as knowing what you want to or what you want to try. So the more experiences we can get exposed to, the better. And that's what I get excited about, is seeing what works for them, what doesn't work for them. And then, coming together, parent, child, myself, I see us as a team coming together to say, okay, so what's the next step?
Well, and I have very similar conversations, and it's the best when I have a student who, is struggling a little bit, and they come and we have these conversations, and I get to say, hey, this is not the only way that you have to do this. Families are, oh my goodness, it's not like there's something else that I can do that will fit a little bit better. Those are fantastic moments, even though I lose them because they're not in my homeroom anymore, and I don't get to follow them. But, getting to let them know that they get to go explore something else and they're not stuck in this one pathway. That's a really awesome conversation to have, because then you get to release them to go find something that fits better and that they're excited about and that's not a drag.
Yeah.
And what an empowering concept of, now you know what you don't want to do. I actually just read an article yesterday about how, as a society, we've kind of created this false expectation that if you don't stick with something forever, that you have failed at that thing. It was this great article about how someone who starts a business, starts a bookstore, they love it, they run it for a few years, things change in their lives, they choose to go a different direction, how we might call them a failed business owner, when in reality they were very successful and they've gone a different direction. And gave several examples of these things that we have accidentally as a society turned into failures. The idea that choosing to pivot and go a different direction. And it's just kind of made me reflect on how we sometimes do that to our high school students. We say, pick a path, and then we may accidentally say, well, now you failed at that path. So to reframe that as, well, now you know what you don't want to do. That was some of the most powerful learning you could have done. There's nothing about that was a waste of time. There's nothing about that indicates failure. You just had a real world learning experience, better than any guess you could have made. Now you know for sure what to expect from that, and nobody can take that away. So I've written that down. I'm gonna take that into my life, into my parenting, into the way I talk to students, and make sure that's what I'm saying in those moments is, well, now you know what you don't want to do. Let's talk about what might come next. I love that.
Yeah, I think, that old saying, one door closes, another window opens, or I think every dead end is a chance to look right or left. Okay, now what? Right? And so, okay, this one ended here. So which way do I go now? And then that opens a whole nother set of opportunities for us.
Do you have any advice so oftentimes in life we set goals and they're hard to achieve. I think a lot of people would tell you that many of the things worth achieving are actually pretty hard to actually stick with and persevere through. Do either of you have any advice for a student? How do you know that this isn't the right direction for you? How do you tell the difference between hard work that might be worth it to you versus maybe I'm on the wrong path and this isn't really, maybe I need to reevaluate the goal? And of course that's going to be different for every single student, but I'm just curious what your personal philosophies are there, or whether you've had any experience working with students through that choice. Is it time to make a new choice?
I think that's a great question. I think we all have to kind of face ourselves in the mirror sometimes, right? And I think that an open line of communication between the student, the parent, and then whatever their support system is. There's hard work and you see some success, and that drives you to work harder sometimes. And then that drives us to give up. There's a dead end, and that can drive us to say, okay, now what? And reevaluate. So again, I think these opportunities for dialogue for, what part of it was successful? What did you learn from this part that was unsuccessful? And then continue to take that next step. But that's hard in those adolescent years, right? But, I think with guidance and support, we can lift those adolescents up. And
I think too, there's a difference in kind of how it feels to do the hard work when it's something that's still fulfilling versus something that I'm doing just because I have to do it.
Yeah.
That, if you feel like the work has lost its spark, and the desire to reach that goal has lost its spark, and you're doing it out of duty or because you set the goal and now I have to follow through. If you don't have that spark, then maybe it's not the right path anymore. And I think one of the really cool things about how many opportunities there are for job shadowing and internships and certificates is that lets you keep kind of one foot in the big goal while you're doing the work to get there. So if you're an internship and it's still really exciting to be participating in this field, then the little steps and the little amounts of work that you have to do to get there is going to feel more fulfilling because you know that what's at the end is still going to be what you want.
That's so great. I feel like you both probably work pretty, maybe not equally, but pretty frequently with both students and parents. Talk to me a little bit about that careful balance of a student being well supported by a parent versus trying to make certain, because you're talking about spark and that motivation. And I'm thinking about, it's really hard for a high school student to stay motivated when the goal they're working toward isn't their goal, but is maybe the goal of a parent. But as a parent, I want to feel like I have a place in helping to set those goalposts, especially at the beginning of high school. My students still pretty young. I don't necessarily feel like they're ready to make all these decisions all on their own. But what have you seen be successful with parents supporting students, but students still remaining in the driver's seat of their own goal setting?
I think that's one of the great things about open education in general is that there's so much room to take your kids out and give them experiences and give them different experiences and participate with them. Then if you as a parent see the spark go off, that's totally different. And having that experience with them and seeing them being able to participate in an internship or just in a field trip and getting to ask questions of an expert, on a tour or something like that, then it becomes a collective group we're figuring out what you like to do, and we're figuring out where you want to go and where your spark is. And that's something that you can do when things are more self-paced and a little bit less rigid.
Yeah, I think, the collectiveness is key here. My motto is together we can do it, right? And I've seen, that helicopter parent, I want A, B, and C for my child, and this is how we're going to get there. And then I see the resistant child saying, absolutely not. For me, it's really important. I do an intake meeting with it's not just about the student and it's not just about the parent. So we do an intake meeting together. But I do refer to the student first. This is about you. What is it that you would like? How do you see yourself getting there? Mom and dad, or mom or dad, how do you feel about this? What are your thoughts on this? Right. And so in extracting that information, I try to find the common ground between the two parties and then try to set up a plan from there, knowing that we'll meet again and it'll probably change, and that's okay.
I love hearing about all the different approaches. I had the unique experience this year of speaking to many of our 8th graders at OpenEd, specifically asking them some questions about their priorities for high school. I have met so many amazing 8th graders who know exactly where they're headed and who, I invited parents and students to attend these sessions. And my favorite sessions were the ones where the students jumped right in, were completely comfortable telling me how they like to learn, what they like to learn, and really appreciated the parents as well who encouraged that. I also appreciate the parent who is willing to watch that student kind of panic and say, I haven't found my own voice yet. I'm not quite ready to express it. Maybe those are the conversations they're having at home. It's a little bit easier for them to talk straight to mom and dad. I'm in the room. Suddenly that 8th grader goes really quiet. But you can watch them turn sideways and look at their parent like, we've talked about this. You know what I would say if I could find my voice. Will you please say it for me? You know, and I love that too. And I could just see that evidence that these are ongoing conversations happening all the time, that they're really student driven. I've spoken to some really amazing students this year who know where they're headed. It's really inspiring to me. Danielle, I'm throwing it back to you here again because, like I said, I know that you speak with many of these students. Have you tell me a little bit about some of the students that you have met and what you've seen as far as students really being able to share their goals directly with you and be able to voice what they're looking for out of their education.
Yeah, so lots of the students who want a state certified diploma, because that's mostly who I'm talking to, or the people who are on that path, they are getting that state certified diploma for two reasons. Usually because it's the only option they think exists, and we get to have some really great conversations about lots of other pathways and lots of other options. Sometimes they stick with it, and that's fantastic because it turns out that this is, in fact, exactly what you need to do to get to your goals. And then the second kind of group of students that I work with is they know exactly where they're headed, and the goal is to get that diploma and get on to the next thing because I know where I'm going and I'm so excited for it. And so I work with a lot of students and talk with a lot of students who are gifted and ready to move through these classes, ready to move on to the next thing. And they are a lot of fun to work with because they are in charge of their own education and they are in charge of their own stuff. And they're fantastic. They are fantastic. So those are the two categories of kids for the state certified diploma.
You hit on something really important there. You talked about a group of students who feels like this is the only option. They just don't know what else is out there. They're doing what they feel like they should be doing. And Rose, I feel like I've heard you express a similar thing about students who are then headed on to college, that many students are doing what they feel like they should be doing. What would you say to students who are just kind of going through that? This is what society says I'm supposed to do next. How would you encourage them to consider options and get comfortable with maybe doing something different than what their peers are doing?
It's a great question. I think that societal norm of that timeline that we talked about, sometimes having those conversations that are uncomfortable need to happen and help them be okay with that discomfort and question what society is saying they have to do next. You look at the cost of college these days, and that's heartbreaking to me. I want students to know you don't have to go to an Ivy League school. You don't have to go go, somewhere where you're coming out with $200,000 of debt because of a college degree. Do I believe in college degrees? Yeah. But I also believe in education and getting an education in all sorts of different ways. I should change it to soaring to college and beyond, because it's not just college. But that being said, having these conversations with our students and our families, right? Looking at accessibility to college or to education, cost of it, location of it. Like, there's so many different options. And because society says you must go to an Ivy League school or you're going to bomb, well, they let them believe that. But there's another part of society that says there's, life offers an education. What piece of that do we want to take and run with? It's hard.
Yeah, I think that those conversations where I can kind of sense, as I'm talking to the family that, I think that actually this is a diploma seeking student who is here because they think they have to be. Yeah. And you start getting the sense of that as you're having the conversation. And then you ask the question, okay, why? Why are we here? Why are you on this path? Why are we making these decisions? And where do you think it's going to get you? And that question, if it's met with deer in the headlights, well, isn't this what I'm supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
Okay, now we get to have a really great conversation about all the other options, because there are so many people who, just like Rose said earlier, it's the high school diploma, you go to college, and then you get a job. I wish I knew off the top of my head how many people, even in college, who've committed to something, change their careers and their majors in the middle of college. I got my undergrad in engineering and worked in industry, and then I went back to school because I changed my mind. And I don't regret that at all. I loved the time I spent in college doing engineering, loved the time I spent in industry, and now I love being a teacher. And all of those experiences were important. And so even if you commit to a college, which seems like the ultimate, I've decided on a major, I'm going to get that piece of paper, that isn't even the end of the decisions that you get to make. That not that you have to, but you get to make.
That's what I've been talking to my recent graduate about, is how exciting it is to enter adulthood, because adulthood is filled with do-over after do-over. You just get to try anything you want to try. And there are, of course, some limitations, mostly money. But if you can figure out the money piece, which is no small task. But if you can figure out the money piece, adulthood is just one adventure after another, pursuing any learning that you want to pursue for the rest of your life. And, so not feeling like he needs to box himself into anything. I mentioned he's going to take this great opportunity to work at an engineering firm before he enters his engineering program at the university that he's picked. And I just keep telling him, wouldn't it be amazing if you opened so many doors in that first year that the university program actually looks like a terrible option, because you've had so many great things come your way. And I said, and what a great option it is to still have there. That door is open. You can walk through it at any point. That's the amazing thing about adulthood and about going to college, is that door never closes. The universities are always happy to accept you as a learner for the rest of your life. And so it's just so exciting to see that as an opportunity instead of as an obligation or as a thing I have to do next. It's there as a really solid way. If I want to go learn more, and if a university setting is the right setting for me to go learn more, there are so many universities out there ready and willing to teach you. And I love that concept of reframing it as an opportunity, not as an obligation, or not as the thing you have to do next.
I think another really great question to ask as students and families are evaluating options, we've talked a lot about jobs and college and stuff, but also, what do you want to do to make a difference, right? Mm-hmm. Where do you want to put your effort and your time to have an impact, or to have these experiences and make a difference? Because for some people, the best thing for them is to work a job that gives them the money to have the free time to go make the difference that they want to. And that's perfectly valid as well. That I think we put so much pressure on, you have to love every minute of your job or of where you end up, that sometimes it's shocking when you get into what you think is going to be your career and realize, wow, there's some parts of this that are hard. And I'm still doing some of that hoop jumping that I didn't enjoy, but where am I making a difference? And where can I see that happening as well? And that can affect what you choose to do and where you end up.
I agree completely. I mean, this image is coming to mind that, we're physical, social, emotional, and spiritual beings, right? And to try to find out what fills that part of each of us is so important. And you're right, Danielle, there's different ways, like work can fill a piece of that for me. My volunteer time can fill that for me. My education can fill that for me. So again, it's communicating and really trying to understand how we become the best version of ourselves and be able to share that with others too.
Yeah, we talk about a well-rounded education, and I think there should be well-rounded careers as well. Well-rounded adulthood.
Yes. Yeah. But I love what you said, Andrea, too, the, adulthood being just one do-over after another again. And it's opportunity after another to be that best version of ourselves.
That's great. Wow, this conversation has been so fantastic. I knew that it would be. So, Rose, I would love to know a little bit more. Have you share a little bit more with people if they are interested in working with a professional like yourself, or more specifically, you. Tell us just a little bit more about what that process, what that experience looks like. How you work with students to achieve their goals, and where they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So primarily, I have my website as my marketing tool, and I used to work for a high school, so I do have a nice referral source from there. People reach out to me and just say, hey, we're, in the process, sophomore, junior year typically is when I start with them. We're not really sure what to do to get into college, or if I even want to go to college, right? And so we'll set up a free 20-minute consultation and talk to the adult and the student in the picture. And we just do an initial intake. What is it that you're looking for? What do you find most stressful, most helpful in this process? And then we set up a plan. There are plans where, I work with them on an hourly basis, or if they want more of a package style, I work with them from looking at their strengths, looking at their challenges, creating a college list or a school employment internship list, and then going through that process until they reach that goal. So there are packages on the website that people can look at, and it's just soaring2college.com. And they can look at the packages available out there. And then we just work out a personal plan that works best for the family. So it's a very individualized process.
I love hearing that there are services like this that families can take advantage of to help guide some of those hard conversations. And I also want to mention that if after listening to this episode, families are just feeling really energized about doing something different, even in high school, I'm really excited to announce that OpenEd will have a virtual high school option available, well, a virtual K-12, but I'll be honest, I'm most excited about the high school option because we're going to be doing something really different and innovative, really putting the student at the center of their own accredited diploma experience. Well, they'll be able to work directly with our counselors to design even what their high school diploma would look like, so that as they're talking about those post-high school goals, they can help design what their required credits would look like leading up to that, so that they don't have to wait for adulthood to say it's full of all the possibilities. I really want those possibilities to start for students even younger, be able to give them that experience of really being able to, if they can have these conversations about where they're headed after high school, they can certainly have these conversations about what they want their high school experience to look like while they're busy opening those doors. So you can check that out at openedacademy.com if you're looking for something different for your high school years. Well, I just want to say thank you both for joining me today. If you could share one last parting piece of advice to the students on the cusp of big life decisions, what would you say? And let's start with Danielle.
I think that recognizing that when you've reached the end of one goal, that there's something else to do after that, and you just get to keep going. And so don't look at the goal as the end, look at the goal as the next step.
And Rose?
Be true to yourself. Really try to find your voice, use all the support that you have around you, and use that voice to say, this is who I am and this is what I'd like to see for myself and becoming that best version of myself.
Well, thank you again, both of you, for joining us and sharing your expertise. I have a feeling that we will probably get some listener questions after this episode. So I hope that you both be willing to join me again sometime. Maybe we can do some specific Q&A. If I get a list going and we can dive into some of these tricky topics. But thank you for joining me for kind of an overview, philosophical conversation about what this process can look like to set goals and work toward achieving them. So thank you so much. And that's it for today.
Thank you.
Thank you.